let's dive right into this explainer and explore one of history's absolute wildest underdog stories. I mean, history is packed with power grabs, sure, but very few are as dramatically unlikely as the rise of Ghazi Malik. We're talking about a man from completely obscure origins who somehow managed to seize an entire empire. So we're going to unpack exactly how he pulled off this incredible feat, relying purely on the historical records left behind.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that this is how Ghazi Malik actually described his own early life. According to the courtier Amir Khusrau in his historical work, the Tughlaqnama, Ghazi Malik literally called himself an awara-mard, which translates to an unimportant or just an ordinary man. So, to figure out how this self-proclaimed total outsider ended up founding a dynasty that ruled for nearly a century, well, we have to look at where he came from.
Section 1. Origins of an Unimportant Man, the Awara-mard. So, our historical sources talk quite a bit about his ancestry, and while they might haggle over the fine details, they totally agree on the core substance. Ghazi Malik belonged to the Kara-Unas. You might be wondering, what is that? Well, it was a Mongol or Turkic tribe from Central Asia, but the term was often used to describe folks of mixed heritage, specifically someone with a Turkic father and a non-Turkic mother. This essentially placed his family in the wider, but definitely less prestigious, Turkic world. And this perfectly illustrates his whole outsider vibe. We've got two major, albeit slightly different, historical accounts. The famous 14th century traveler Ibn Battuta described him generally as a Karanis Turk from the region between Turkestan and Sind. But then the historian Farishta paints a much more localized picture, claiming a mixed lineage with a Turkic father and a Hindu Jat mother from the Punjab region. But regardless of which exact detail is right, historians neutrally record a mixed heritage that tied him deeply to the local demographic fabric of Hindustan, rather than, the traditional elite bloodlines. But the absolute crucial point to take away is his incredibly humble beginnings. Historical texts declare him a minor chief who actually spent a long time just wandering around Delhi looking for a job. He started his career as a menial servant. Then he worked as a keeper of horses and a literal cattle driver for a merchant. It wasn't until much, much later that he finally caught a break and found his way into the Khalji Imperial Guard. Moving right along to Section 2, rising in Khalji service and building a military reputation. His ascent was a slow burn. He definitely didn't become a top general overnight. Back in the early 1290s, he first distinguishes himself during the siege of Ranthambore. After bouncing back from a brief stint of political obscurity, by 1305, he's serving as a chief subordinate at the Battle of Amra, where he actually helps defeat a Mongol force. And then, just a year later, he's trusted to lead the vanguard of the Khaljis army against Mongol invaders, securing yet another massive victory. Sultan Alauddin Khalji clearly recognized this guy's talent and ended up trusting him with what was arguably the most dangerous job in the entire empire. He was appointed governor of Multan and Dipalpur, right out there on the frontier, and tasked primarily with guarding the routes used by invading Mongols. To survive that meat grinder, he strategically built a fiercely loyal army by recruiting local Jat tribesmen. These were the very men who would end up fighting for him in all of his major future battles. 29. According to Ibn Battuta, that is the staggering number of victories over the Mongols recorded at the Jama Masjid Mosque in Multan. Now, to be fair, other contemporary historians like Barani claim it was 20, and Khusrau says 18. But honestly, the exact digit hardly matters. Whether it's 18 or 29, his reputation as an absolute brick wall defending the realm was undeniable. But then, the political landscape shifts violently. Section 3. The usurper's deadly coup and the crisis in Delhi. So this stability Ghazi Malik had fought so hard to protect? Nah, it didn't last. In 1316, his patron Sultan Alauddin dies. A period of brief puppet rule follows until Alauddin's son, Mubarak Shah, takes control in early 1320. But things go south really fast. By July of that year, a general named Khusro Khan orchestrates this massive conspiracy, straight up assassinates Sultan Mubarak Shah, and usurps the throne for himself. This violently plunges the state into total chaos. The capital is suddenly in the hands of a violent usurper. So the huge question hanging over the entire empire was who has the military might, and the daring, frankly, to stand up and fight back. Ghazi Malik, stationed way out in the frontier of the Dipalpur, initially refused to recognize the new sultan, but his local force wasn't quite strong enough to march on the imperial army in Delhi all by himself. Which brings us to Section 4, the Secret Rebel Alliance, and a high-stakes father-son conspiracy. This part plays out like a Hollywood thriller.
Ghazi Malik's son, Fakhruddin, was actually a high-ranking officer inside Delhi at the time, and he takes the initiative. He convenes a secret meeting with friends, sends an urgent messenger to his father in Deepalpur asking for help, and literally flees the capital on horseback in the middle of the afternoon. The usurper sends his minister of war in hot pursuit, making it a literal race against time. Meanwhile, Tughluq sends an officer to secure the Sirsa fort along the route, guaranteeing his son's safe passage so they can finally plot the rebellion together.
Once reunited, father and son decide it's time to fight. But to wage war against the capital, you need a rallying cry, right? According to historical sources, Ghazi Malik stated his justification was to fight for the glory of Islam. He framed his rebellion as an act of absolute loyalty to the murdered al-Adin's family and a righteous crusade to punish the criminal usurpers in Delhi. The sources impartially record this as his primary messaging to gather allies. He mapped out his alliances by sending identical letters to 5 neighboring governors. And wow, the responses were a deadly mixed bag. Bahram of Utch supported him, Mogolati of Multan refused and was promptly beheaded by his own men. Yaklaki of Samana actually tried to attack Tughlaq, failed, and got killed by his own angry citizens. Meanwhile, 2 others promised support, but conveniently arrived late, basically letting Tughluq do all the heavy lifting. And the reaction from high-ranking officials inside the capital? A masterclass in political survival. The current wazir, surrounded by the usurper's men, secretly expressed sympathy to the rebellion and promised to simply withdraw his forces when the battle began. He completely refused to openly fight for either side, which really highlights the immense tension and the terrified wait-and-see attitude of the Delhi elite. And here is what's so fascinating about his rebel army. While his stated public justification was strictly religious, on the ground, he actually united a highly diverse coalition. His forces included Turkic, Mongol, and Persian warriors, sure, but historians explicitly note he heavily relied on Hindu communities as well, groups like the Khokars and the Mewatis, who fought fiercely alongside him. He leveraged all available regional power, regardless of background, to get the job done. All right, Section 5, Seizing the Delhi Throne, and the final push. Now, you can't march an army without cash, right? First, Tughluq intercepts a caravan carrying tribute and horses from Sindh to Delhi. Next, he takes this hijacked treasure and distributes it directly to his soldiers, which massively boosts morale. Over in the capital, news of this advance caused absolute panic. A desperate Khusro Khan consults his counselors and frantically orders the execution of al-Adin's remaining sons, just to prevent any rival claims to the throne. But the usurper's panic couldn't stop the inevitable. The climax of this explainer is actually swift and decisive. In late August 1320, Tughluq's forces crush the usurper's army at the Battle of Saraswati. Just days later, in early September, he achieves a final crushing victory at the Battle of Laharwat. Khusro Khan flees, but is quickly captured and killed. And on September 6, 1320, the crisis officially ends. Just like that, the former cattle driver was now the ruler of the empire. He officially adopts the title GhiyathAlDinTughluq. And because Tughluq was an overarching title rather than just a surname, this marked the founding of the Tughluq Dynasty, which would go on to rule the Delhi Sultanate for an astonishing 94 years. That made it the longest ruling dynasty of the era. It is a truly stunning leap in social mobility for the medieval world. So as you take away these facts today, I want to leave you with this final thought regarding the true nature of historical ambition. Was Ghazi Malik's incredible ascent from an unimportant man to the Sultan driven by a genuine righteous loyalty to the old Khaljis dynasty? Or was this carefully calculated rebellion the ultimate opportunistic power grab by a brilliant military mind? The historical records lay out the facts for us, but I leave that final judgment to you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.